No. So, welcome to our Christmas social. Both of those are the university, and those of you on Zoom. As usual, those of you on Zoom, if anybody has a problem with the Zoom setup and so on, please do put it in chat. And Elaine is hosting this evening, and hopefully you'll be able to put things out if necessary. I'll start with the usual introductions, and then the rest of the evening will include a variety, 2 quizzes, hopefully 3 talks, and the refreshments we will be having at the end. So I'm sorry, those of you at the university, you're going to have to wait. Those of you at home, I have to apologise again, obviously, because you can't share the refreshments with you. But what we will be doing during the refreshments is showing another quiz, the second quiz. So those of you at home can have a go at that quiz and hopefully join us in a glass or something. And we'll be looking at it as well here during the refreshments, and the answers will be at the end. And if anybody in the university would like to join us for a drink at the pub afterwards, I dare say that a few of us might be going. So feel free. Right, part of the usual introduction that I make is to tell you about the forthcoming meetings. So I'll do that. Our next indoor meeting is on January the 10th, when John Forgan will be talking about the birds of Portugal. If anybody saw his talk on Sri Lanka, you'll know that he has excellent photographs, and it'll be a very interesting talk. Our next outdoor meeting is with BOC on Thursday, the 4th of January, which Debbie Reynolds is leading to Walbury Hill. Talking about BOC, their next outdoor meeting is on the 28th of December. It's a Christmas, so they'll be meeting about 10 o'clock, and then they will decide where they're going, depending on what's about. If you're interested, get in touch with Leslie Staves. If anybody wants the contact details for any of the people, please let me know. Their next indoor meeting is on the 6th of January, when they're having a members' afternoon with tea and cakes. A couple of other local groups, the RSPB groups, Reading first. Their next outdoor walk is on the 17th of December, so that's a Sunday, when they're going to Little Marlow Pit. And then they've got one on a Tuesday as well, where they're going to Greenham Common. That's 19th of December. And their next indoor is on the 9th of January, Tuesday 9th of January, which is got a talk called Wild Coast by David Boag. I'm afraid I don't know which Wild Coast. I think it's in the UK, but I couldn't work out because there's too many possibilities. I'm sure it'd be very interesting. That's at Pangbourne. And then next, again, there's the Wokingham and Bucknell RSPB group. Their next indoor meeting is tomorrow, where they're having their Christmas social in Hampstead. And their next outdoor meeting is until January the 14th, when they've got the coach trip to Slimbridge, which we're sharing with them. Rob, am I right in thinking they may be full by now? Yeah. They probably are full. But if you really want to go and have a book to try, you never know, somebody might drop out. Right. One other thing I want to announce is that those of you who were here last time will know that we have our latest report out, 2019 report. If you're here and a member and haven't yet got a copy, please do pick it up. And if anybody else, do you need more people to help volunteer deliver them, Jane? Always do with that. She said anybody else can help volunteer to deliver them. We try and reduce the costs as much as possible by delivering many by hand. Please do see Jane. Right, recent sightings. Anybody seen anything interesting lately? One hand at the back. Oh.
Yeah, very nice, beautiful marsh tits. The Kruger Reserve in Bits.
Right. That was marsh tits at the Warburg Reserve in Bix, is it? And that was in. He apologised for that being in Oxfordshire. For those of you on Zoom. Andy.
Ringtail hen harrier at Roden Downs.
Which downs? Roden Down. Yeah, that's a ringtail hen harrier at Roden Downs, Compton.
I think it's been there a while, and one or two weeks. Seen person ran around long enough and once. Been a Great Northern Diver at Teal Main Pit, which is a tree.
So there's good news about the hen harrier. That's been hanging around, so if you persevere, you might see it. But not so good news about the Great Northern Diver at Theale, which is at a distance. Is that reasonable?
Well, last time I went, I saw it 4 times in about an hour.
Oh, it is visible occasionally then.
It popped up.
Okay. Right. Dave?
Just a comment on Great Northern Divers. We were down at Pagan Monday. Just looking at Jersey. We found the Great Northern Diver. It washed up there
Oh.
and their guy was
Oh. Right, another bit of bad news, not local, but Dave was just saying that they've heard that there's been Great Northern Divers washed up at Jersey, dying from starvation. So a sad story there. And one more from the back.
Yeah, this is what it's actually seen together within.
Okay. Back to Oxfordshire and the hiding bits in Warburg. 5 different tits in about 20 minutes, did you just say? Yeah. So if you're interested in that, including the marsh tit, right. And I think Neil had his hand up as well.
Yes, for the second time, great white egret on the downs, unlike Andy's that was on the ground, this is actually flying over steadily eastward, but very down, following the ridgeway.
All right. And that was a great white egret on the downs, flying eastward along the ridgeway. Very down. Oh, this is a good night. There's lots of hands going up now.
Is Sonning Eye in Berkshire or Oxford?
Oxfordshire. That's a question about where Sonning Eye is now. It is just over the border. I can say that with confidence because my house backs onto the lakes. So.
Well, I mentioned that Hawfinch.
That was a Hawfinch in Oxfordshire at Sonning Eye. Okay, Andy.
I must tell you that it was even nice. I've been over Lample Way, coming back to mostly from the Farnborough Road, if you know it, the village. And I was driving along, it was about 500 metres in. I come the other way, and I saw it really close and white from the ground. I didn't know what it was. It was just so brief and quick. So I thought that's a bit odd. Went another 100 yards around, turned around the farm, came back. And I was driving down slowly, and this white object on the edge of the road. And I thought, well, that was a neat one. I had my binoculars still on my passenger. Put my binoculars, looked at the front windscreen. I just did not believe it was a great white egret.
Wow.
And every time a car came by, it flew up and landed on the tarmac, and then walked in.
Wow. For those of you, apologies for those of you on Zoom, you may not have heard much of that, but that was a very interesting tale from Andy about how he'd seen a great white egret by the side of a road in West Ilsley on the Downs. I haven't got time to, in fact, I can't remember all of it, so I won't go over it all. But thank you for that, Andy. Unless there's anything else on Zoom, any other recent sightings, I think it's time we moved on. Good. We have quite a packed programme, so I'm going to start though with a few words and a few slides about Robert Gilmore. So let me just get that set up. And share my screen. Now, most of you probably already know this, but Robert Gilmore, who sadly died last year, was involved with the club for many years, both as a member and an officer. And if you've got your copy of the 2019 report, you'll know that we've got an obituary for him. So if you want to know more about him, please do read that. One of the things he did that's been most prominent, if you like, for ourselves is that he did the covers for the artworks for the covers of the bird reports from 1949 onwards, basically. And on the back of the report, this probably won't show in the Zoom, but on the back of the report, we've put forward the different covers as an illustration of the different types he did.
Look at the lights down a bit, Sani.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you, Belize. Yes.
Won't show on Zoom because it's going through.
What much?
So if you hold it up to the camera, it won't show because it's going the screen.
Well, they should be able to see me as a speaker.
Yes, but very small.
Well, apologies if you couldn't see it on Zoom, but if you've got your 2019 report, you will see it. Okay, so we have what Robert did was he did most of the artwork to originals that he did specifically for us. They were topical to the year. And we have 6 of those which we still own, and he gave them to us on purpose to raise funds for the club. So in the past we've sold them to members and through eBay, but we're going to do something a bit different this time. I just want to show you the 6 we've got. That's the buff-bellied pipit from 2012. I'm sure some of you in the room will remember there was some at Queen Mother's Reservoir. Yes. Yeah. All the paintings, by the way, are watercolours. So may not be as collectible as lino cuts. But as I said, these are all particularly done for the club. That's the second one, Palace's Warbler. That was the first record for Berkshire in 2013, where there was a nice long-staying one from January to April at Eversley GPs. Now, since Robert's died, there's been quite a big increase in the interest in his artworks. We've seen a big jump in the lino cut parties that have been sold. I'm not sure what that means for watercolours. They're not as collectible, and these are obviously particular to the BOC. 2014 was the Great Reed Warbler. It was one day at Green Park in May 2014, the 4th record for Berkshire. Now, Peter Driver, who recently joined our committee, has volunteered to organise selling the artworks, probably through an auction house. There's one that has sold a lot of Robert's works over the last year or so. So he's going to approach them first. 2015 was the Red-necked Phalarope. That was seen at Main Pit Seal, again for one day in May. When we know when the auction will be, we will inform everybody of the details. So if anybody in the club wants to bid for them, they can. Please pass that information on to anybody you know who may be interested. We've certainly seen an increase in people contacting us asking for copies. 2017, who could forget the Hawthorne eruption? Actually, Venton called it an invasion in the report. From October 2017 through to April 2018, I even had one in my garden. So, yeah, throughout the county. And lastly, the 2018, the goshawk for the first recorded breeding in Berkshire. Sadly, that was the last one Robert was able to do specifically for us. That's why, after that, this year's bird report, which has got the back-wing stilt on the front, that's an adaptation of one of his existing drawings because we weren't able to have one. So that's just a taster, if you like. We're going to, as I said, be auctioning them in the. Yeah. Oh, I see. Auctioning them in the future. I've managed to completely lose the stop share button on my Zoom screen. Bear with me a second. Oh, there we are. So we will be letting you know when that happens. And I think we have also got people who are interested in buying copies of buying Robert's original artwork. So if anybody has any that they'd like to sell, Jane certainly knows of a couple of people who are desperate to buy artworks from Robert. So please let her know. Right, the first longer talk is me, and I'm going to be talking about a couple of my holidays that I was lucky to have last year. So let me get that set up and take it from there. Yes, in 2022, last year, I was very lucky. I managed to visit sub-Saharan Africa twice. We went to Botswana in March and then South Africa and Lesotho in October. And one thing this reminded me of was that the varied habitats that you can get in Africa. So rather than just going through and saying this is the lovely birds and animals, I'm going to be doing that, of course. But I thought I'd relate them to the habitats and the different wildlife that you get in different areas. So it's going to be a swift look at 4 habitats and the wildlife you might see there. In Botswana, in March, we went to the Kalahari Desert, an slightly unusual place. It's the only time to go is the wet season in that time of year. We went at the end of the wet season. And the dry season is basically just too dry, and the wildlife isn't easy to see at all. In October, I went to South Africa. We had 6 nights in Kruger, I'm going to look at, staying in rest camps. Now, that was in the dry season. So although when we look at them, the habitat will seem very similar to South Africa. In fact, it's because it's a different season, and you get very different wildlife. Then we went to Lesotho, which I confess I knew nothing about before we went. We went up the Sani Pass, which is the mountain access, one of the mountain road accesses from South Africa to Lesotho. So we're now talking about high altitude. And then I went down to the Cape. So we looked around the coast and to some of the wetlands. So 4 different habitats. I'm going to start with Kruger, which you might think is I think most people would think of as the classic African safari. It's savanna with rocky outcrops, as you can see there. Best time is the dry season, because that concentrates the wildlife around where the water is. You can see there is still some vegetation about, but it's very dry, very dusty. And that was one of my, if you like, classic photos, the elephants crossing the road, the large African elephants in a group crossing over in front of us. You can get very close to some of the wildlife. Just a couple of other habitat shots though first. There are some green trees around in this team, but not all of them. That's a baobab tree, known as the tree of life, because it has fruit, seed pods, and leaves that are edible, and it stores water as well. Obviously, a beautiful shape. And that's a watering hole. That was at the first rest camp we were at. Absolutely vital in the dry season. This is where you see a lot of the mammals and birds, because that's where they need to go. So I'll start off with a couple of very photogenic zebra who very kindly arranged themselves nicely for me. Actually, I find that quite interesting, because although the pose is the same, it shows quite reasonably well that their stripes aren't. Every zebra is a different stripe pattern. And if you look up their backs, you can see that a little. Now, not all animals are that elegant when drinking. I'd say that's not its best side of the giraffe. But like the zebra, their spots are unique, like the zebra's stripes. I've started to bring in a couple of birds now. You've got an Egyptian goose hiding on the one side. And if you look closely at the back of the top of the back of the giraffe, you'll see there's a few oxpeckers. I love oxpeckers. I always come home. I've been to Africa, I always come home with photos of oxpeckers if I can. That's a female greater kudu and one of the antelopes. And as you can see, they're red-billed oxpeckers, not only on but inside the ears of the kudu. I looked up when putting this together what they eat, and I knew they did insects and ticks, and larvae and parasites and so on, but I'd forgotten that they also take some of the blood from some of their hosts when they can. And I discovered that they eat earwax and dandruff as well. So sorry to bring that in, but does explain more about why they're inside the ears, I think. You know, the kudu was quite tolerant, I think. It was flicking its ears a bit, but it did allow them to carry on. I also noticed from that photo that they use their tails like woodpeckers. So they're braced against the bird. I guess when they get flicked off, they need that. And there's only 2 types of oxpecker. There's a fairly poor photo of the other one. That's a yellow-billed on the top there. It still has red on the bill, but does have some yellow as well. And on a fairly tolerant-looking African buffalo. Some of the mammals are very confiding. This is another antelope, a bush buck, and that's at one of the other rest camps. And we gave it came quite close. It was obviously used to being fed. And we gave it an apple to feed, and you can see it sniffed it, was interested, but it couldn't work out what to do with it. So we obviously cut it up for it, and it happily devoured the lot. And I'd like to think it was grateful, because it then came even closer and allowed me to take quite a close portrait, I think. So I hadn't been in Kruger for so long before as this time, and the animals around, especially around the rest camps, can be really, really tame and confiding. Even the birds. It actually wasn't at the rest camp. This was out in the Kruger. Southern ground hornbills, wonderful looking birds. They march across the ground hunting in small groups. They are sadly, though, declining. They're endangered in South Africa. But again, another creature that doesn't mind having a close-up at times. I apologise for missing the bottom of the bill. However, I couldn't resist putting those in just because of the eyelashes. I mean, they're not the most beautiful of birds, but my God, what a pair of eyelashes. Yeah. There are obviously other hornbills in South Africa, in Kruger. That's a southern yellow-billed. I always think they look very cross. They kind of, like as though they've got a grievance or something. Another ground feeder, of course. And that one, again, will come very close, especially if he thinks he's going to get some biscuit crumbs. That one got a fair number of at the rest camp. It's not the only bird that would come there. In fact, the natal spurfowls there were the first to come in. As soon as you appeared at where you're staying, they were coming in looking for food. So, of course, we started birders, fed them. That's an adult spurfowl, natal spurfowl. There was a pair of adults, and they brought their kids with them as well. So sharing the biscuits, and you can just see them at my feet there. They also would happily take the food. The adults would take the food from your hands as well. And I even had one that came, might be getting interested in bird watching, although he's looking the wrong way. Sorry for the quality of the photo. It was very bright outside where we were sitting, but it decided my tripod was a good perch. Other spurfowl, that's a Swainson's, another one that lives in the grasslands and savannas. We saw quite a few of those. And another resident that you see in many places, that's a crowned lapwing. Prefers the dry, open habitats, which is quite nice when you want to take a picture of it. I do think we're much as I love our lapwing, I do think other parts of the world have got a much bigger variety and well endowed with lapwings. And that's one of the striking ones. And there are plenty of other pretty birds, of course. That's lilac-breasted roller, widespread resident. Very good for photo opportunities because you can see it tends to sit up in a nice place to be seen. I've got plenty of photos of those. And you also get a great variety of starlings. So that's a greater blue-eared starling. Lovely birds. That's actually in Kruger. It's at the southern end of its range, but there are a number of different other starlings around. And it wouldn't be right not to include some vultures. Those are white-backed vultures. I mainly put that in though because it shows the habitat again well. It's lurking about on a tree, as they often do. You can see not only the trees, other trees there, but in the background is what they call a copy, a rocky hill or outcrop, which are dotted around in the area. That's the most common vulture you get in Kruger. We also saw lappet-faced and hooded, but unfortunately they are much far fewer, and really are not many of them left, unfortunately. On to some predators. We'll go from the scavenging vultures to the predator. We were very lucky to see a pack of African wild or painted dogs. They are difficult to see, but we were lucky there was some right by the track at one point when we were driving round. I think they're lovely animals. I think these, a bit like hyenas, tend to get a bad press, but they are really, really interesting. And we didn't see many cats in Kruger, but we were lucky on a night drive. They're difficult to do in Kruger. I'll come back to it in a minute, but that leopard was caught in the headlights and didn't seem to mind in the slightest. Actually, the driver had done what he wasn't supposed to do, which was go off road to get close to it. You can't drive yourself in Kruger at night. You have to go on an organised trip like this if you're in a rest camp. And so this is on a group trip. So that's a very quick look at Kruger. As I said, that's kind of classic area. But let's go on to the second habitat, which, as I said earlier, are similar to Kruger, but we were there at the end of the wet seasons. It's the best time for wildlife. We're in the Kalahari Desert. I hadn't realised, I was putting this together, that I knew it was big. I didn't realise it was 900,000 square kilometres. If we should prefer miles, it's 350 square miles, which I work out is about 43 Wales, times the size of Wales. Semi-arid, very sandy savanna. So although it superficially can look like Kruger, where we were in the Central Kalahari Game Reserve, I said we were in the wet season, and it's the only time you can really visit there. And we were in a mobile camp, which I strongly recommend. I'll start with some predators again. It's only no insects that have to be concerned about this. This is a bat-eared fox. It likes termites, apparently. But lovely looking creature again. And we saw a reasonable number of those. We saw a lot of black-backed jackals. Very widespread. They'll eat almost anything they can get hold of, from insects up to they can just about take an impala or an antelope. But they also eat fruit and berries, so you know, anything going basically. You can see though there that the sparse vegetation that is very common around in the Kalahari. As I said, it's the end of the wet season. You can imagine what that would be like in the dry. But there's the biggest predator in the area. Definitely carnivore, yeah. It is actually a good area to see them. We saw quite a few. And you've got a battle-scarred male there. And not far away was the female. So, having shown you a male and a female, anybody want to take a guess on what the next slide might be? I could have done a video, but I thought, no, I'll stick with a still. It's not always that peaceful where he's actually licking. Times there's biting and fighting going on. But I don't know if you know that they mate repeatedly for a short time and then they have a rest and then they do it again and again and again and again. And I understand that lionesses often mate with more than one male. And there was actually another male in the vicinity. So we were just speculating that he might have been waiting his turn. Who knows? It's also a good area for cheetahs, and my favourite big cat. That one is resting in the shade. It's very sensible, even in the wet season. So that's why it's fairly dark, but just lovely looking creatures. We didn't see many, but they are. I'd be surprised if you went and didn't see them. Lots of other mammals around. Another fairly ungainly pose for a giraffe. I've not seen them fighting before, but they were here. They were doing it fairly gently, so our speculation was that they were play fighting. But it was very interesting to watch. And there you can see that there are some areas of grassland and feed around in the Kalahari. At the other end of the scale, that's a Cape ground squirrel, which we saw a lot of, in a very sandy area. And they burrow and so on. And it's just these sparse vegetation. Time to go back to the birds. There you are, the biggest bird in sub-Saharan Africa. What I should have said earlier is that most of the creatures that we're looking at, most of the mammals and birds, are only found in sub-Saharan Africa. There'll be some others that aren't, but most of these are just in those areas. So there's 3 common ostriches, 1 female on the left and 2 males, showing the various sides and the habitat as well. And that's the largest flying bird in Africa, curry bustard. Smaller, obviously, than ostrich, but it's still a very big bird. And you can at times get fairly good views of bustards. Not all of them, the smaller ones creep off into the grass, but the curry tends to stand out. Another large bird that's iconic in Africa is the secretary bird. It's widespread, but it is endangered. I always find it difficult to remind myself it's a raptor. It's a bird of prey. It mostly is terrestrial. I've seen it on nests on trees. And it'll eat pretty much anything, insects, rodents, small birds, mammals, a very, very broad diet. I just think they're such wonderful in the way they walk and through the strut through the grass. And in this, like in Kruger, for spurfowl around, on the other ground dwelling birds, that's a red-billed spurfowl. And that one's an orange river francolin. The book says it's shy and retiring, but that was in the middle of the road. It actually prefers being in thick grass, but they come out onto the road. I was, both of those were on the road, and I was amazed at how many birds we saw on the road. Now, you're obviously going to see more on the road than you will when it's in the thick grass, but a lot of birds seem to come out onto the road by preference. For instance, this one is a pale chanting goshawk. We saw quite a lot, and I think the majority of them were on the road. They mostly hunt, they say, from elevated perches, but certainly from what we saw, they weren't all up there. And a few colourful birds. I mean, there's smaller birds in the area. Little bee eater, lovely little bird. And the other bee eater we saw a few times was swallow-tailed. And obviously there's other less colourful birds about. There's a fluffed up saboto lark, and one of my favourite larks, red-capped, which really likes the open areas, as you can see there with the sparse vegetation. One of the other types of vegetation that you see a lot of in the Kalahari are thorn bushes. Also got birds sitting on them at times. That's a scaly weaver. They're very, very common, and there tend to be large flocks of them. In fact, we had to force our guide to stop to allow us to look at them, because for him they were so common, he would just say there was just another load of scaly weavers. But we finally managed to persuade him. Another common bird sitting on thorn bushes would be the Moriko flycatcher. Not quite as interesting to look at, but a nice species. And we saw a couple of snakes. So there are other wildlife around. We were lucky to see 2 different species, both highly venomous. Now, if anybody doesn't like snakes, don't let that put you off going to somewhere like this, because we were, although actually I was about to say we were perfectly safe, and we were, but we were actually had just got out of the, had a cup of coffee out of the vehicle before this one appeared. That's a black mamba. And we think it was coming back because it had left a mouse half dead, which died while we were there. And apparently what they do is they bite him and go away while the poison works and then come back to eat the prey. So we think it was coming back for the mouse. Amazingly long snake. It went up into the tree and you could see the whole length was about 2 or 3 meters. Really big snakes. And the other one we saw was a Cape cobra. Shorter but still just as deadly. It reared up as us while we were in the vehicle. It reared up as the vehicle from the side of the road. And you think, oh, you're okay. But in fact, we've got open-sided vehicle. So I'm glad to say that the guide very quickly moved out of the way, and we just about managed to see it as it dashed across the road. So don't let it put you off, though. It's unusual to see snakes, as you can tell. And it's just part of all the wildlife. Those of you watching earlier will have seen that's my screensaver at the moment. That's another iconic tree in Africa, especially in this area, acacia. With a couple of hornbills sitting in it. So that's the Kalahari. I'm going to move on to a very different habitat now and have a quick look at the Cape Coast and the wetlands around that area. Very different indeed. We went down and we went a short distance along the south and then a short distance along the west coast, and also visited the Cape and some of the wetlands as well. So we're now into water. That's the view from the apartment we were staying in Simon's Town. Sunrise just as the sun's coming up. Lovely place to stay. It's overlooking False Bay in the Western Cape. And that's one of its garden birds. Every apartment there has a balcony overlooking the garden, and there's loads of feeders. It's actually owned by somebody who operates a birding tour company, and I can't recommend it highly enough. There were lots of birds in the garden. I'm only going to put one in just because there's so much and so little time, but it's very nice. You can overlook the garden, and that was at sunrise, just after the sun had come up. And I'm hoping this will show up well enough. This is another garden creature. Cape porcupines, they come in every night. The orange bit you can see there is actually the food that was put out for it. There were 2 came in the night we saw them. It's a very brief look. As you might expect, covered in very nice spines, but I didn't realise they got this long crest, this long hairy crest at the front. And they're far bigger than I realised. I didn't realise we'd just seen one earlier by the side of the road, and they are, I mean, big animals, big spiny animals, wonderful. Difficult to photograph at night, though, I have to say. And this is another bird that coming up now. That's another animal rather that's difficult to photograph. This is a Cape rock jumper. This is my second visit to the Cape, and we missed this the first time around. It's endemic to the area, only a very small area indeed. There are only 2 species of rock jumper in the world. I put these photos in because they're the only ones I've got, and they're not as sharp as I'd have liked by any means, but at least you can get to see the bird. And they're very special to the area. I would say that please note the colour underneath. I'll come back to that later. It's a nice warm orangey brown. So they're one of the endemic birds. Another bird that you have to see in the area. Not endemic necessarily to the area, but it really is a key bird, and that's the African penguin. Very easy to see. There's 2 colonies that you can very easily visit with boardwalks and car parks and all the facilities. But sadly, they are declining, and another bird that's uncommon. The book that I looked at said they were pudgy, which I think is fair enough. I'm looking at that one leaning on the right there. I've got so many photos of those penguins. Difficult to choose. I just happen to like the idea of a leaning penguin that one got in. So they're definitely worth seeing. And this is their habitat. This is the rocky outcrop at Betty's Bay where we saw them there. Very easy to visit, and it's one of the highlights for me of going to the Cape. They obviously share that outcrop with other creatures. 4 different types of cormorant. That's a crowned cormorant, which is the smallest. And there's also nesting Cape cormorants in the area. Difficult to tell apart. You can just about see, I hope. Yeah, the crowned cormorant on the left's got a red eye, and the others have got turquoisey dark eyes. There's also bank cormorants and white-breasted in the area, which is the subspecies of one of the subspecies of great cormorant we've seen. And there's many, many lizards. This was in the area where the penguins were, and they all out on posing nicely on the sunny rocks. That's a Cape girdled lizard, which is endemic to the area, and a blue head of a male southern rock garmer. I'm not normally that keen on lizards, but I have to say there were lots and lots of really interesting lizards to see. So again, lots of photos to choose from. Back to birds, not many gulls in the area. That's a hawk-lob's gull, but it's endemic to the west coast down that area. It's a very smart, clean-looking gull. And you can't go down there without looking for whales. You can actually see the right whales, often the southern right whales, which these are, from the coast itself. When we went last time, we failed to because it was so windy. So this time we did a boat trip. And there you have a mother and calf that came up quite close to the boat. Delightful. And I only then found out why they're called light whales. And apparently that's because they were the light ones to hunt. Because when they die, they float. Hopefully, a thing of the past. We went to the Cape of Good Hope, very windy, so very few photos from there. It's the most southwesterly point of Africa. You can see cormorants going past, you can see greater crested terns and sandwich terns, and a lot of waves and wind as well. It's quite difficult to even keep on your feet around this area. And we then went up to the west coast slightly. We went up to West Coast National Park, very different again. Not only that kind of open area by the coast, we also got extensive wetlands. So I put in just a couple of photos of wetland birds. Those are lesser flamingos. I like them, always like seeing birds in formation again. And I make no apology for showing you the other side of the rear end of the greater flamingos that we saw, or some of them. I just, it's not their best side, but I couldn't resist. I like just like that as a photograph. So both lesser and greater flamingos, and a lot of other water birds, including waders. You've got there the African oyster catchers, and then a whole host of sanderlings in the middle. And then the terns are mostly sandwich terns. In fact, I think they all are. It's quite hard to see all of them properly. So, as I said, most of the birds we're looking at is sub-Saharan, but quite a few of the birds we see get further around the globe. The last bit of the Cape I'm going to just tell you briefly about it's a place that's fantastic for birds, very easy to get to from Cape Town. We actually went there on the morning before our flight home. And it's a really big, easily accessible area which you can drive around. And I don't think any holiday would be complete without a sewage works. This is, I don't actually know how you pronounce it, Strandfontein, I think. And if you ever go, you must visit it. Those are both greater than lesser flamingos again, and the landfill at the back, of course. And there's ducks. There's lots of other water birds. I'm just picking out a few today. Cape teal and yellow-billed duck, living up to its name. And just one little other one to look at here. Very big sacred ibis breeding colony. A very short clip. You can also, if you look carefully, see a few pied crows in there. Plus the rest of the landfill equipment and everything in the back. You know, birds don't care about these surroundings, do they? I really enjoyed going there. But I have one more habitat to come in. I promised I'd keep the time, and I think I've got 4 minutes left, so I'll do my best. Very different again. This is the last habitat I'm going to mention. This is when we went up to Lesotho, an independent state, so the Sani Pass from South Africa. That's actually the view on the way back. The border with South Africa, the border post, I should say, is at the bottom. The actual border is at the top of the pass, but they have the border at the bottom for South Africa to make sure nobody goes up unless they're in the right kind of vehicle. You've got to be in a 4x4, and you need a good driver. That is at about 1,500 meters. The top, when you get up to Lesotho, is about 2,700, 2,800 meters. Hell of a gap, hell of a height to climb in 9 kilometers. That's looking back down the valley as we've come up. You can see the road over on the right. That's actually one of the least steep bits. It's a very steep, and some of it's still gravel. As I said, you really need a 4x4. There's no barriers, and I really could have done without our driver and our guide, just from the accidents they'd witnessed over the years. But there you go. When you get to the top and you get into Lesotho, very different habitat. Well, not different. I mean, it's really quite bleak, as you can see. I mean, there is wildlife there, which I'll show you some of this. It's a landlocked independent state. It's the highest one in the world. The lowest point in the country is 1,400 meters, and it includes the highest peak in South Africa, which is about 3,500 meters. So interesting countries. I'd like to go back. I'm not going to apologise for that photo. I'm hoping you can just about see it's a bearded vulture sitting on its nest. You can certainly see where the nest is, if only from the droppings. We were lucky enough to see one on the nest and then another one fly in, but unfortunately I didn't get a flight shot. Quite a widespread bird. All the rest of the wildlife I'm going to show you from the area is more localised. That was one of the highlights. That's an endemic rat. It was one of the easiest animals I've ever seen, I think. We said we'd see some, and we saw dozens. That's a slugget fly rat, or nice rat. Very common in the Lesotho, on the top where we went up to, and they're all over the place, lots of them. And it's quite a cute rat, really, isn't it? Yeah. But let's get back to the birds. That's an African rock pipit. We saw singing. I should say, up till now, all the photos you've seen have been mine. This one, though, was taken by Mike Kempton, who a member of the club who I was on holiday with. Most of the rest are taken by him. My shots from up in Lesotho weren't wonderful, so thanks to Mike. One of the stranger birds we saw up there was the only ground-dwelling woodpecker that you get in Africa. That's a ground woodpecker, original name. But apparently there's only two others in the world, and they're both in South America. A bit more widespread than those birds. This is a grey tit. Quite smart, I thought. Quite confiding as well, could come quite close. And there's quite a lot of Cape buntings about. A bit more widespread, but still a sub-Saharan bird. You won't see it any very far away. That's one of my photos. That was even more restricted range. That's a sentinel rock thrush, which very kindly posed nicely for me. It was on a post. It's unusual. But I got one more bird to finish with. And some of you might have worked out what that is by now. The other rock jumper. This is a Drakensberg rock jumper. It was relatively easy to see up while we were going up towards the top of the pass. We saw a few of them around by the side of the road, and as you can see, they pose on tops of rocks and so on. I remember I said, look at the colour on the Cape version. This one, as you can see, similar but paler. So, and that's it. That's all the rock jumpers in the world. So we were lucky to see both of them on one holiday. And they're both lovely, striking birds. Now, my timer on here says I've got 1 second left. 30 minutes. So I always have to finish with the African sunset. And our guide in the Kalahari, where this was very good at finding us really good views and even getting animals to pose for us. So we get the last 2 ostriches. Right, that's the end of my African adventures from last year. Let me stop sharing if I can work out how to. While I'm doing that, if anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to chat when we're eating, but I'm very lucky to be able to go to these places, I realise. Now, the next part of the evening is going to be done by Neil. So you're all right if I leave that slide up on the
Yes, indeed.
Yes. And he's hopefully going to come down here and give everybody a quiz. So I will move out of the way.
I'll come round a few. Oh, it might be an idea.
Yes. For those of you at home, please, you need a piece of paper and a pencil. And we've got a short quiz from Neil, who I'm sure will be down here to take over from me when he's handing out the piece of paper. Actually, I think I'll turn up all the lights.
Okay.
So Neil's visible as well when it's on.
Oh,
Are you okay with us light, or is it again?
well, see whether people can hear me at home. Ali and I'll have a mic. No. Use it. Right. Nice. Take a seat. Right.
Anybody else? No?
Oh, yeah.
You want one here? Not yourself?
No, I'm not. I've got the answers, I'm afraid, Andy, so I'd be cheating. Where's the camera? I think you're looking down. Okay. There are 40 questions. 40 questions, but I'm going to go through them at a reasonable pace, so there's no shame if you don't get a huge number of them right. Follow, in a bit like the format of the old quizzes I used to do, I've divided them into 5 sections, each with a theme. So listen carefully. If you can't hear me, shout so that my technical support can, I think there's a lady here this evening, can indicate to me that I should be shouting back at you. So, Group A of questions is all bird places. I want you to tell me in which country each of the following migration watch points or observatories are. So, number 1, I hope I pronounced this right, Organbidicka. That's good. Number 2, Cape Clear. Number 3, Falsterbo. Number 4, Tarifa. Number 5, Batumi. Number 6, Raibaki. I hope I pronounced that one correctly as well. Number 7, Ottenby. And number 8, Point Healy. A few minutes to write them down. And then I'll tell you what, we'll move on to, we'll do the 5 categories, and then we'll come back and we'll get the knowledgeable people in the audience here to shout the answers out for you. Okay. Section B is all about bird colours. Colours. Okay, number 1. Slightly slower, they say. Okay, question 1. What is the colour of the iris of a coot's eye? The iris of a coot's eye. Number 2. What is the colour of the feet of a black guillemot? Number 3. What is the colour of the top of a male siskin's head? Number 4. What is the colour of a buzzard's feet? Number 5. What is the colour of a pintail's bill? Number 6, both. Number 6. What is the colour of the iris of a jackdaw's eye? Number 7. What is the colour of the gape, which is the inside of the mouth? So this one is probably the most difficult one. Of a common guillemot. And finally, number 8. What is the colour of an adult kingfisher's feet? Sweet. Footses. Okay. Few moments rest. The third section, section C, is bird people. Number 1. Who was the first female chief executive officer of the RSPB? Sounds like Andy had a date. Okay, number 2. Which United States artist gave his name to the American equivalent of the RSPB? As long as you can pronounce it and shout it out, that's okay. Number 3. Which MP sat on the council of the RSPB but ended up in jail for fiddling his expenses? Number 4. After which eminent Scottish ornithologist is the headquarters of the Scottish Bird Club named? Number 5. What was the nationality of Shetty, after whom the warbler is named? Number 6. Who was the last, that's the previous, chief executive officer of the BTO? Number 7. Name any of 3 of Mrs. Thatcher's cabinet ministers who are also bird watchers. And number 8. What was the nationality of George Steller, after whom the seagull, the eider, and indeed various other mammals and birds are named. What was his nationality? Dave knows all these, I can see. Okay. The fourth section, section D, questions about bird names. Question 1. Which bird is said to be named after a Danish king? Question 2. What's the usual common name of St. Cuthbert's duck? Question 3. What game bird gets its name from the Gaelic or Gaelic, I don't know which is right. Gaelic, thank you, for croaker.
How do you spell that, croaker?
Croaker. That's not the Gaelic. Okay. Question 4. Which seabird name is derived from an Old English word meaning strong or male? Not that those things are necessarily the same. Question 5. Which bird's scientific name means small monk or small friar? Number 6. Which bird name is said to originate from its fondness for eating flax seeds? Number 7. Which species name is the Gaelic, got that right this time, for horse of the wood?
Oh,
And finally, number 8. Which seabird's name is said to derive from the French for William? And the final section, section E, bird books. Question 1. Who wrote H is for hawk? Question 2. What does HBW stand for?
Question 3. You've all probably seen the adverts for it, but which species is on the cover of the new 3rd edition of the Collins Bird Guide? It shows how resistant you all are to advertising.
My dining room table. You didn't know.
Question 4. What was Chris Packham's autobiography called? Question 5. Who wrote The Natural History of Selborne? Number 6. What was the subject matter of Tim Burkhead's book, The Most Perfect Thing? Number 7. What was the name of the publishing imprint or brand co-founded by our former president, Andy Swash? And finally, number 8. For what county or area was the first British local bird atlas published? It was a toughie, wasn't it? Yes. We haven't got the answers yet. You may have got a whole load of that. Okay, shall we go back? Okay. Back to 1. Okay. Amongst the audience, which country is Organ Badixka? And if there are any Basques here, I apologise for my... It's in France. It's a Pyrenean mountain park. Great place to go, by the way, in autumn, if you've not been. Number 2, Cape Clear. Ireland, well done. 3, Falsterbo.
Sweden.
Yes, great.
Neil, can you repeat the answers because they may not hear you on?
Oh, okay, right, okay.
Hear us, so I'll hear you. So.
Sorry for those at home. 1 was France, 2 was Ireland, 3 was Sweden. Number 4, Tarifa. Spain, well done. Number 5, Batumi. Georgia, excellent, well done. What about Rybaki? It's in Russia. It was Rossitten when it was in Germany, but is now in Russia. It's in the Kaliningrad Oblast, separate bit between Lithuania and Poland. Well, one of the world's oldest observatories. And Ottenby. Ottenby is Sweden. And finally, Point Pelee. Canada. Well done, Andy. Okay. Section B, the colours. The iris of a coot's eyes are... Nobody ever looked into the eyes of a coot. Red, yes. Yay. And what colour are the feet of a black guillemot?
Red.
They're also red. Well done. And what about the top of a male siskin's head?
Black.
Black, exactly, yes. What about a buzzard's feet? Yellow indeed, yes.
I've got beige, does that count?
Only when they've been paddling in mud. Probably. What about the bill of a pintail?
Right.
I prefer black, but we'll allow grey because it's Christmas. As long as it's dark. What about the iris of a jackdaw? Have you looked at jackdaw in? Right, well done. And the gait of a guillemot. Now, who's looked down the throat of a guillemot? Yellow, well done. Most amazing sight when you actually see it. And finally, what colour are the feet of an adult kingfisher? Orange or red? Okay. Right, the bird people. The first female CEO of the RSPB was half a mark for Andy. Barbara, any more? Barbara Young, now Baroness Young of Old Spoon. And who was the United States artist who gave his name to the American equivalent to the RSPB? I had Audubon, well done. And what was the name of the MP who sat on the RSPB's council but ended up going to jail for fiddling his expenses?
Jeffrey Arch.
He went to jail for cooking.
No, any?
Is the brother.
No. It was Elliot Morley.
Oh.
That's right, yeah. Environment Secretary. Okay. And after who is an HQ of the Scottish Bird Club named? Famous ornithologist who was an ex-prisoner of war. George Worcesterston. Shame upon all Scots present who didn't get that. And what nationality was Chetty of Warbler fame?
Italian.
He was indeed Italian. And who was the last previous CEO of the BTO? Andy Clements, well done. And name any of the three of Mrs. Thatcher's cabinet ministers who said they were bird watchers. Ken Clark, yes.
Bacon.
No, but
Lawson.
no, but we had some Michael Heseltine. And the last one, Norman Lamont. So any one of those will get the point. And what nationality was George? Oh, I did George had a Stella.
Russian.
He was a German. He worked for the Russian government, but he was a German. Okay. Bird names. Which bird is said to be named after a Danish king? It is indeed not. Somebody's going well up there, Rob. Couldn't. Not. What we now call St. Cuthbert's duck? Common eider, well done. And what game bird gets its name from the Gaelic for croaker? Any closer? No, you've only got one left now. Ptarmigan. Okay. The seabird whose name derives from the Old English for strong or male is The gannet. And which bird's scientific name means small monk or small friar? Thought you might guess this. The puffin. Kalahari means small friar. There we go. And which bird name is thought to derive from its fondness for eating flax seeds? Linnet. Well done. And the Gallic horse of the woods is capercaillie. Well done. And the seabird whose name is derived from the French for William is guillemot. Well done. Okay, and on the last lap, the bird book. Who wrote H is for hawk?
Somebody, but I can't remember myself.
Half a mark. Helen MacDonald.
Oh, I got McDonald.
Oh, right. Put your halves together. Okay, and HBW stands for Handbook the Birds of Western Palearctic.
Or is Benjamin Ward?
No. Right. And which species is on the front cover of the new third edition of the Collins Bird Guide? You've seen all the flyers for it? Swallow. Well done. And what did Chris Packham call his autobiography?
One-handed sparkle jar.
Fingers of the sparkle jar. Well done. Okay. And who wrote The Natural History of Selborne? Gilbert White. You'll get that. And what was Tim Burkhead's book, The Most Perfect Thing About? Eggs. Well done. Okay. And what was this publishing imprint that was founded by Andy Swatch and indeed Rob Still?
Wild Guides.
Wild Guides. Well, and finally, for which county or area was the first British local bird atlas published? So go around the whole country. They even talk about this and nobody's remembered. Okay, it was the West Midlands.
Oh.
Right, so, okay. I don't know your scores. I don't know whether anybody wants. We'll see who got the highest score in the room, and then we'll just invite anybody at home on the chat who wishes to claim more. Okay. It was a real toughie, that. So let's start off. Who got 20?
20.
I thought that Rob Godden was sat there looking very smug.
Actually,
How-
20.
21?
24 points.
22?
Not 21.
21? Yes. So we have a 21 and a 22.
I've just got over 20, but I got 20 and half mark for Helen.
Okay. So it looks like in the room, our bird brain of Reading is currently Rob Godden. But sadly, beyond the kudos, there are no prizes. But if there's anybody at home who claims more, can they put it in the chat? I don't think I can see the chat here. And put their camera on, and we'll make a rude noise at them for being clever. No, we'll congratulate them for their supreme knowledge.
We have a booby cry. I think it might be me. 6.5.
6 times. No, that's...
Anything less than 6, anybody?
Oh, must try harder. Okay, well, I hope you all enjoyed that. I don't know if there's anything in the chat from anybody who is claiming there isn't. So well done, Rob. And I think I now hand over to you for the next session. Is that right? Right, okay. Happy Christmas, everybody.
Right, we've got a slight change to the technology now, in that we're going to use Rob's laptop for his talk. So bear with us while we Got the number now. Do you want me to? Well, is it still open? Need to. We'll need to unmute this one. Mute this one first. Oh, there we are. Right, let me just.
I think it's hot enough.
It's still on the same camera. So do you want to
That's the long one. Just pressing the long one.
turn that round a bit? A little bit.
Oh, that is hot. Yeah, it's lovely. We could turn it
off,
off,
yeah.
do you think? Possibly, yeah.
Right, everybody, we're going to pass over now to the brain box of the evening. You do very well indeed. This is a short talk from Robert about a different kind of winged animal, well, insects. This is butterflies in Ghana. I'll just turn the light on.
Okay, thank you. Well, my interest in butterflies goes back as long as my interest in birds, and I've been very fortunate in recent times to do quite a bit of travelling, and many of those trips have been in search of butterflies as opposed to birds. And I was very lucky to be invited to go on a trip to Ghana, where the focus again was butterflies. And as well as having two local guides, well, a local guide and a local driver, we were lucky to have a butterfly expert from Hungary who is doing an awful lot of work in West Africa. And for me, it made a nice change, because I generally come away from these trips with masses of photos and no idea what they represent. But this expert was able to just have a quick glance at photos and instantly say what species there was in there. So let's see where did we go. So Ghana is on the south coast of West Africa. It's 2 along from Nigeria, the Ivory Coast to the left, Burkina Faso to the north, and Togo to the right. And this is it's a map of climate really, but it shows the main habitat zones in the area. So the dark green by the south coast of West Africa are the areas of rainforest. To the north, there's an area of what they call Guinea savanna. North of that is what they call Sudan savanna, and that's the classic savanna habitat that you also get in East Africa, but that's north of Ghana. And then the orange band is the Sahel, immediately south of the Sahara. There are several national parks in Ghana, but we just visited 4, starting at Mole in the north, and then on the east near Togo, there's Chabobo. Then we came back along the east side of the Volta Lake, went to Kakum National Park, and then finished at Ankasa National Park. So it was 2.5 weeks we were out there. And sadly, there is very little natural habitat outside the national parks. We must be grateful that these national parks were set up a long time ago, and mostly they're protecting the natural habitats. So the nice thing about a butterfly trip is that you see loads of other things at the same time. Generally, the organised part of the day is relatively short. It starts when it's warm enough and it finishes when it starts to get too cold for butterflies to fly. And so if you've got an interest in birds, then you can be out before breakfast. And if you're interested in moths, then you'll be out even before that. In fact, there's very little time for sleep at all. So we were lucky to see this Gaboon viper, which is the largest viper in Africa. It's about 2 meters long and it can give you a nasty bite. Something else we saw was this huge scorpion. It's one of the largest in the world. And I looked up on the internet to find out a bit about it, and sadly every reference to it was about keeping them as pets. That's the only one we saw, but they are reasonably common apparently. Now behind the warning, there's a bird called the yellow-headed Picathartes. So this bird is relatively famous. It's been brought to us on our television screens by David Attenborough, a bird that was thought to be extinct in Ghana, so it's still very rare in West Africa. I thought it'd be an idea to take a video of this, but the bird didn't move for 2 minutes, so there's not much point showing it. And then there was this incredible experience. Well, I don't know if you heard that, but one evening we went out after dark, and the guide stopped us and started playing that recording, and he heard this rail calling in the distance and went charging off in that direction, and we followed and charged through the undergrowth. We weren't even on the track, and eventually he shone his torch up, and there were 4 of these birds. This isn't my photo, as you can see, but it was a similar experience. They were up in a tree, and somehow the guide had pinpointed them from a long way away, and they were giving off this really weird, sort of funky noise that you just wouldn't imagine came from a bird. Anyway, the talk is supposed to be about butterflies. So what I was going to do to organise it, rather than actually go around the routes that we took, I'm just going to show examples of related species, and they're kind of organised from starting with the more degraded habitats and then going through savanna and then finishing up with butterflies that are more typically encountered in rainforests. So an awful lot of the country is developed along roads like this or this, and what you'll see are really the very common species. I mean, there's this horrible expression I hear from birders about trash species, and if that actually means species that occur in trashed habitats, then that would apply. So typical species would be various grass yellows, and you might be familiar with some of these if you've travelled elsewhere in Africa or even in Asia. A lot of these species are very widespread. Number of different species. Of course, the distinctive features tend to be on the upper side, but if the light's right, you can just about get an idea of the pattern of the black in the apex. So these are all.
Would you like me to try and move that bit from the top of the screen so it's not coming up some of your text?
Oh yes, thank you.
Well, wish me luck. Where's your mouse? Oops. Should be able to go that way. There we are.
Great, thank you.
Do you want your mouse back on the other one? Or is there?
Yes. Okay, and these are very common species as well. There's lots of different types of orange tips. They don't all have orange tips. They could be purple, red, orange, and sometimes the ground colour can be yellow as well. These aren't closely related, well, not very closely related to our orange tip. Some of you may have seen the desert orange tip in southern Spain or North Africa, and it's the same family. And again, these are extremely common. Wherever there's grass, like grass around a hotel, these will be flying a few inches above the ground. And this is the African grass blue. And it's the same species that you might have seen in the Canary Isles or southern Spain. And incredibly small. Okay. And you get lots of other small blue species. A lot of them are very similar to blues that we would get in Europe. On the top right, there's the grass jewel, which you actually get very rarely in parts of Greece. But top left, we're starting to see something quite different. And it's an example of one of the pierrots. And again, these are butterflies that you could find in Asia. The upper side would be blue and black. And okay, again, another very common species, but very photogenic, I think. So this is going to look a bit more like the Guinea savanna habitat. I mean, we'd just call it woodland, but it's a little bit more open than that. And I've done a few other trips to sort of tropical areas, and quite often you'd see large numbers of butterflies mud puddling on the road or around streams. We weren't seeing that very much in Ghana. We're having to look quite hard for most of the butterflies we were seeing. particularly hard sometimes. In their defence, it had been quite a successful moth trapping session that night, and they were just catching up on the last few species. Occasionally came across a real gem like this. This is the pale checkered gem. It's in the family of Lycaenidae, so it's one of the blues, though it isn't blue on the upside either. And quite a rare butterfly, and forms discrete colonies. Is widespread across a lot of West and East Africa, parts of East Africa, but quite rare.
That's little tails coming out the back.
Yes, as in yes. Some species might have three.
Okay. And you would meet that with big ones, isn't it?
Yes, there's just a comment from the hall about the tails. There are two tails on each hind wing of this species, and some other species of blue and hair streak might have three tails. I'm going to talk about them with the next species. An example of one of the so-called fairy hair streaks. They're able to move their hind wings, which causes the tails to wiggle about, and it's thought that is a distraction for potential predators, which might see the moving tails and decide to attack that end, which is less critical to them than the head end. Yeah, the head being at the left-hand side of the insect. Apparently, there are several species that are all very similar and can't be identified from a shot like that. I was rather pleased to get a picture of the upper side, but even so, it still can't be identified down to species. There are quite a few swallowtails in the tropics. This one is the common striped swordtail. These are really quite difficult to photograph because even though they might come and land fairly close, they're continually flapping their wings, and so it's hard to get them even slightly sharp. So you end up throwing away a lot of photos. Another swallowtail, narrow-banded green swallowtail. That's quite common out there. And another one, the citrus swallowtail. This is an example of a species which uses hilltopping to meet a mate. They have a lot of butterflies have a strategy of flying up to a hilltop, and if all the other butterflies are doing that, that's where they're going to meet each other. And so it's not just swallowtails. You get butterflies in Europe doing that as well. There's another species of swallowtail that occurs in Africa, or at least two others, which have different colour forms, and the males all tend to be the same pattern, but the females come out in different with different patterns, and sometimes they are deliberately, or well, sometimes they are mimicking other species. Butterflies use mimicry sometimes for protection. They can sometimes mimic insects that are distasteful, and then by not being poisonous themselves, they gain an advantage or gain protection from predators. So moving on, acraeas. This is a very large family in tropical regions, and you've got related families in South America as well. Very often they've got patterns of black and orange and red, which usually indicate a poisonous subject. This one is quite interesting in that researchers have been looking at colonies of these butterflies and find that many of the colonies have a very high preponderance of females. And it's hard to say what the advantage in that is, but it's thought that this is controlled by a bacterium which deliberately goes after the males. Some more examples of acreas, the typical red and black pattern. And this one is one of the largest in the area. And we're getting towards rainforest habitat. This was flying very low down in quite dark conditions. Okay, so moving on to skippers. I mean, virtually all the main families that we have in Europe, you know, skippers, swallowtail, the browns, the blues, they're all represented in Africa. But of course, there are many, many more species. The one at the top is an example of what has the common name of a policeman. So, some of these have little black spots in the white area, and depending on the number of spots, they become one pit policeman, two pit policemen. And then down the bottom right is rather similar to our grizzled skipper. In fact, it's in the same family as some of the grizzled skippers in Europe, like the red underwing skipper. It's the same family. So, moving into some rainforest habitats. So even in the national parks, unfortunately, the tracks have opened up the area to the activities of loggers, and it does still go on. It's quite hard for them to completely control it. And the waterfall on the right was our target for a sort of 5-kilometre walk one day along a stream, which produced loads of species. It was incredibly hot all the time we were out there. It was in the mid-30s and very humid. And so a 5-kilometre walk was quite an endurance test. And this is what it typically looked like down at ground level. So once you've stepped off the main track and gone into the forest, you've got a light covering on the ground. And then it's fairly open just above that level, so you could see through at sort of head level. But then it's an awful long way up to the canopy. So this is an example of a skipper, the blue red-eyed skipper, quite a large species. There are some other skippers with red eyes, and these tend to be crepuscular or even nocturnal. And this one has got an interesting habit in that it finds the flower of one of the bindweed species, and while it's drinking the nectar, it gets carried away, and towards the end of the day, it falls asleep, and the plant closes around it, and it passes the night safely like that until it's woken up in the morning by the increasing warmth. There are loads of these. I suppose these are the equivalent of our meadow browns and gatekeepers. It's always worth taking a photograph of of them because there are so many species and there's a chance that they're not all the same. These are interesting. These are what are known as pathfinders. So the butterflies that fly very low above the ground along paths. So they're flying around your feet and you think you might get a photo, but they're always one step ahead of you. And I mean, you can see these two examples are in the same genus, but there are others in other genuses which have a very similar pattern, but are not so closely related. And then we get on to the gliders. There are about 70 or 80 species of these in Africa. They usually fly fairly high up, but they do come down. And I was seeing quite a few of these sort of mid-morning when the sun was breaking through the forest. This one is quite a rare one, just occurs in a limited part of West Africa. And they get attracted down to ground level by rotting fruit and things like that. So they get their nutrition just from drinking the juices. And this is a more common species of glider. It's more widespread. Another very characteristic group of butterflies are the foresters. And a lot of these they fly in rainforests. And again, they fly very low over the ground and occasionally they settle. And there are loads that are variations on this theme. Luckily, we had the expert who could tell us in an instant what they were. Another one, it's rather photogenic. This one's a bit of an exception. Still in the same family, but it is quite different and distinctive. But then on our very first day, as we were driving through the savannah, the guide noticed these on top of a log. I don't know how he spotted them from the coach, but he caught them, had a close look, and none of the features stacked up with what he already knew. And the suspicion is that this is an undescribed species. So he's going to go back and have a closer look at a sort of series of butterflies and see whether the differences are constant or if it's just down to individual variation. But he's already attached his name to a number of new species, so it'd be no surprise if this is another one. Another group of butterflies of the forests are the charaxes. We have one in Europe, the two-tailed pasha, and these are all in the same family. And again, these are butterflies of the high canopy, and they would happily spend all their time up there, but they do get attracted down to ground level by all sorts of noxious stuff on the ground. They're looking for places where they can imbibe the fluids, and that will give them the essential minerals. There's two more here, they're drinking from the mud. Very attractive one here. And then two different species of green charaxes. The top left is a common and widespread one. The one to the right is much rarer, and it was seen on the way to the waterfall. But if you look closely, you can actually see what it has attracted it, and it's a dead freshwater crab, and it's finding something nutritious there. But worse still, these were actually photographed in Uganda. There's a whole mass of charaxes which have been attracted to baboon droppings. And just to finish up with, this was a group of butterflies that I hadn't come across before, and they were quite engaging, really. This is a family within the large family of blues, and they've got this habit of settling on very fine twigs or tendrils, and being so small, they're very easily overlooked because this is all happening within the rainforest in quite dark shade. So tiny little butterflies, and at first sight you see a white blob and you don't think anything of it, but at close sight there's a couple of butterflies there, and they're all associated with ants. There's nearly always an ant nest nearby, and whereas the ants would devour anything else, they offer protection to these butterflies. You know, walk right past them or over them. And it's thought that the ants are benefiting from a secretion from the butterflies, some sort of honeydew. I've not heard that they have the same association that some of the blues in Europe or even Britain have with ants, where the eggs are taken down into the butterflies' nests. All quite remarkable, very, very small. This one I tried to get a video of, but it didn't come out very well. But it was flapping its wings from a shut position like this to an open position with the wings almost wrapping around the twig, very, very rapidly. Another very, very small one. And I'll finish with what's probably the most spectacular. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. It's nice to see new types of wings at times. Right, that's our last presentation for this evening. I'm just going to swap back to my laptop. Now, can you and I'll just explain what I'm going to do. Well, I was going to, but my screen's just gone blank. Well, my laptop's decided to pack up. No, it's not. That's why. Sorry, bear with me a minute while I get my laptop back up and running. It just decided to go off. Yeah, what I'm going to do is run a okay, am I back on the Zoom? Yeah.
Recording in progress.
Let me just mute. Right, let me explain that again. We're just going to run a set of slides, which we'll leave running automatically while we have the refreshments, so that you can do the quiz at home and we can do it here in the room. We'll get the slides open and then we'll be in business. The answers will be at the end. What these are 20 pictures, 20 drawings that each represent a different bird that you might see in the Western Palearctic. And they're going to go around on an automatic loop, so don't worry if you miss them, they'll come back around in about 4 minutes later. And some of them are fairly easy, Some of them will make you groan, but hang on, that's one button. It's a bit more tricky. We'll have a go, and I said the answers will be at the end. So just start this going, and if anybody at home has any problems, unmute yourself, and there we are. 20 birds, each representing 20 drawings, each representing a different bird, as he said. Enjoy. And for those of you in the room,
This is alcoholic, this is non-alcoholic.
there's mulled wine, there's non-alcoholic drinks, and there's a feast, a table full of things to feast on down here. And this is going to go round and round again, so don't worry if you miss anything now. It will be here again in a bit. Don't delay. The chili sauce are delicious. See, I thought they'd all be so hungry they'd all come. They'd all intent on the quiz. Come and get a plate for you. They're all numbered. You can.
There are napkins here.
They're going to go round and round a few times, so don't worry.
That's non-alcoholic.
Delivering the books.
Hi, those of you watching on Zoom, I've just interrupted it briefly. I'll be putting them back up again in a moment. I know. I just needed to. Hi, as we're getting quite close to the end of the evening, everybody who's out there in Zoom land, I'm going to change and I'm going to show you the answers. I'm sorry that this one actually said. There we are. So if hopefully you had time to look at all the different pictures, but here are the answers.
Only got work to. The three. Well, four wasn't it?
Oh, it's not working. Oh, hang on. Sorry, that was my fault. Bear with me, I'll hit the wrong button. Now we've got the answers.
Is one of the ones online now?
No, they're Marilyn and Colin.
Okay. So actually, you have a chance to see the answers if you want to.
Just say a few people to the people on mute as well as all of us.
Okay. Not a lot. They won't stop everywhere. Just have to wait for the rest.
Yeah,
To the two people who are still with us on Zoom, hope you enjoyed the quiz. Marilyn, did you see all the answers? Okay. She's not talking about it. And Colin, I can't see you. I don't even know if you're still there. Was that?
Yes, we did see the answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. And
Team right.
away from Colin. Right, we're packing up now. So thank you all. Happy Christmas.
Thank you.
And
Happy Christmas.
here, and we'll see you again in New Year. First meeting's the 10th of January.
It's Colin. You should be here.